Send Candid House Media LLC presents Date Etiquette, the latest, most modern, most positive commitment-focused global relationship show. Date Etiquette segment is geared towards strengthening friendships to go into commitments, boosting adult relationships, reconnecting broken ties, and building bridges, not walls, with proper and dysfunctional families in the age of social media interruptions. Send Candid House Media's presenter is Professor Lynda, the author of How to Stay in a Positive Relationship or End an Abusive One. Lynda can be seen covering popular social events and is poised to make a difference in the global community. By the end of this show, couples, guests, friends and frenemies would learn body language, feel more confident about each other, drop their phones to focus on each other, stop being obsessed with social media where they simply admire other couples, and maintain datetiquette in their commitments to one another. Those singles will learn how to approach others, learn friendiquette and committiquette. Send Candid House Media LLC has a series of how-to and do-it-yourself etiquette shows to come. Email us to attend future shows and connect with us. Now, stay tuned for Date Etiquette.
Date Etiquette has reviewed the statistics on relationships. Women are the likely victims of intimate relationship and partner violence, with 85% of domestic abuse victims being women and 15% men. The dynamic of a specific relationship varies according to each person's specific characteristics. And what do I mean by that? Traits, behavior, and the efforts to remain polite, cordial, kind, social, and spiritual. So in every happy relationship or great friendship and commitment-focused relationship and happy marriages, it is very important that we reduce tension, anxiety, stress, depression, poverty, and crime. Happy relationships reduce crime and depression. We spend so much time on job applications, work interviews, business negotiations, and rental applications, plus mortgage applications that last 30 years. But how come we spend very little or no time screening the person that we spend the rest of our lives with? Guess what? Date Etiquette teaches you the correct etiquette for rekindling current relationships. It is similar to a work review. When you're at work, don't you sometimes get reviewed? So in your current relationship, you are to complete a review. How to complete a new application to get into a committed relationship, and how to continue is what we're going to do. To do this, I will first of all ask these happy couples what the secret is and what has kept them together for so long. The couples are going to tell us, and we will learn from them. And of course, we can address any problems or any questions that you have. Hello there. Welcome back to Date Etiquette. We have another wonderful couple, Steve and Jeanette. Welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have both of you here. Quite frankly, it's a privilege and an honor for me to even chat with you. So, Steve, tell me how it all got started. How long have you been together and that kind of thing?
We've been together 25.
Another 25-year couple, yay!
Okay. And I met her at school.
You met her at school?
Yeah, I was going back to get my GED.
Really?
Yes.
High school?
It was
after high school?
It was after high school.
Okay,
yeah. Yes.
Sounds good. And what happened when you first met her? What was the first question? Who made the first?
I introduced myself to her.
Okay. How did she respond?
She just told me her name was Jeanette.
And
carried on from there. She was doing the math stuff.
Did she have a sparkle in her eye when she first met you? Was there a sparkle in her eyes?
I
you don't remember?
Yes, I remember. It's been a long time.
Yeah,
it was a long
25
time
years. It's a long time. And she really liked you right away. Was this love at first sight?
No, we were friends.
Oh, friends.
We were friends,
Okay.
yeah.
And Jeanette, how long were you friends with him?
Well, it was only barely 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where did you guys go out on a date for? Where and how long?
I would take her out to lunch real quick.
Yes.
Like, say there was places where, go have lunch. That's okay, real quick on a break. And that's basically where, once in a while, I would invite her to come to my house, me and my mom and them.
Okay. And you took it from there. Jeanette, did you like him so much as to consider a commitment, the C word?
No, I didn't.
You didn't? No, not at first.
No, because I think in the beginning I was there for school,
Yes.
and I had just became a Christian. I was
Okay.
Catholic all those years. I had just became a Christian. I just went to Pastor Stacy's church. You know, it was called Jubilee Restoration back then.
Really?
And
Amazing.
I was just excited about that.
Oh.
Really just excited about, you know, knowing God in a different way that I was brought up to know him. You know, and when I met him, I wasn't thinking of that, you know, so we just but I liked him. He was a nice, you know, he was like he said, I was struggling with math, and he'd come over and he'd help me. But I remember when I went in to go and they give you a tour. He was all looking at me like that. I remember. I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have trouble with that guy. For real, I thought that. But you know, I had, to be honest, I had my own thoughts for my own life at that time, and no, it wasn't him. So you know, when you set your mind on that, you don't let your guard down, so to speak. You know, to let your heart open to something else. You know, but he tried and he kept trying. So obviously.
How did you win him over to the church? He didn't start the church. He didn't start going to church with you.
He did because he wanted to come be with me because I was always at church.
Aha! So now we know what the secret is. Once there's a pretty girl in church, a guy wants to come along to church.
I knew I was gonna have no chance.
You know
with
what?
her.
At lunchtime, I'd go by myself and I'd go read my Bible. And he'd come over and he goes, "Can I sit with you?" I go, "Well, I'm going to read the Bible. You want me to read it to you?" He goes, "Okay, read it to me." And I'd read it to him. And then eventually I was going to church and he goes, "Can I come with you?" I said, "You can come with me." I was in a dance team at the church with Pastor Stacy, and he goes, he'd watch me dance and he'd watch me come rehearse and stuff like that. And he came, and then eventually he got baptized there too. Pastor Stacy baptized him there.
Dr. Stacy Lee again.
Yes, thank
To
you.
give you the credit.
Yes.
Wow.
And by the way, we were married 25 years. We've been together 25 years, but we've been married
23.
23.
Okay, still close. That's fantastic. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And so this is the secret. Whenever there's a pretty girl that goes going to church, and if a guy really, really wants her, you start doing what she's doing. And the girls somehow seem to be convinced in their hearts that God wants them to do the right thing,
Yes.
holding off in intimacy and kissing and all that until at what point did he propose and you guys decided to get married?
You know, that was, I would say, about a year after we started, you know, finally dating. He did propose, and you know, I said yes. Of course, I said yes.
Through a lot of letters.
Because I saw that he was wanting God. You know, I didn't want to do that, and it was hard. I'm not gonna say it wasn't hard. It wasn't hard. It was hard to not kiss. Not that we didn't. We did, but I would try to minimize not to because
You were attracted to him, and
yes, but it's true though. You know, you get other feelings when you go to that level.
Yes.
Kissing. You know, and you have to remember to. Can you stop yourself? Can you not? You know, are you gonna?
Did he try grabbing you, holding your hand, kissing your hand before you were ready? Did he try doing that?
Holding my hand.
Because a lot of guys do that.
Holding
They
my
embarrass
hand,
you
yes.
all the time by being too eager.
No, he was good. He respected my wishes. I told him I was gonna wait. You know, that I was gonna wait till we got married, and he respected that.
There's a point right there. So good guys always wait.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Who said yes? Somebody said yes in the audience. Yes? Okay. Amen. Amen to that.
You know,
so
again,
good
not that they
guys always
agree.
wait. They don't rush you into that little hookup, one night stand. Oh, let's just get it over with kind of big deal.
Right.
You know, we don't need that.
Nope.
If you want a relationship to grow, you have to wait. And you propose the right way. If the lady says, oh, okay, I'm going to Bible studies today at Kingdom Increase, you join her. If she says, let's go jogging, you join her. If she says, oh, let's read this book, How to Stay in a Happy Relationship, you pick up the book. You do what she's telling you to do because God is speaking through her.
Right.
She's got the spiritual gift of doing the right thing. This is amazing. Do you two have children?
We have four.
Four kids.
we have
Okay.
four.
Okay. How do you raise them together without arguments, disagreements, and that kind of thing? Are there challenges and drawbacks to raising children together?
There's sometimes challenges. We have disagreements sometimes on.
And what do you
Should we
do?
do
Throw a custard pie in her face, or what do you do when there's a disagreement? Do you yell at her?
No, don't actually yell at her. Just step back
And
and we'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
okay, and she doesn't run her mouth like some of us
No.
women. We just keep going on and on and on. Well, let me tell you this. Well,
No.
I've got to tell you that. So she wasn't doing that.
No, we
She was
step
just
back and
calm
we'll talk
and
about it later. Yeah.
okay.
Not in
good.
front of children. So
Okay.
we'll talk about
At
it
least
later.
when they were younger, we try to just keep it. When they're older, when they were younger, we try to keep it so they didn't have to hear us
Okay.
disagreeing or agreeing, whatever. Well, agreeing, of course, it'd be in front of them, so they knew we agreed.
Yes.
But disagreeing, behind closed doors, so they.
So you didn't shout and scream in front of the children.
best to not-
So they
yes.
didn't grow up with domestic violence
No,
and
I always thought that
breaking
was
up
the
the
worst.
TV and throwing plates.
Yeah.
Did she ever throw a frying pan on your face?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's a good wife, Jeanette. Yes.
Yes.
Do we all
definitely.
agree?
Yes.
Yay! And you didn't throw any custard pie to the
No.
wall or anything like that?
No.
Did you make him do a lot of dishes and vacuum the floor and find his socks?
Oh, I wish. when I used to, I'm a stay-at-home mom. But when I used to work, I
Yeah.
worked maybe 7 years, maybe 10 or 15 years out of a home marriage. But he'd have to cook and clean.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this goes to tell you that for a couple to be happy together, they cook and clean together, and the guy chips in. No waiting for Jeanette to do all the cooking and cleaning like we do in some African families. The woman has to do all the chores. The man just sits back with the remote control and just enjoys his day and newspaper or a book, and he's reading and he's chilling, and he wants her to make sure you fix the house properly. So you didn't do that?
No.
Why? What kind of a man are you? Are you a real man?
Well, in the beginning, she had a C-section, so I always had to take care of her, clean the house up.
Very nice of
take care of the
you.
baby. And so
Well, I had a
did all that.
C-section, so hey.
Yeah, well,
Nice of me.
some guys,
Take care of
even when you have a C-section, they don't
No,
care
it
to help you.
hurts.
They go,
Yeah.
well, too bad. You're the one who had the baby, so deal with it. So he didn't do that.
No, he was.
So this deserves a big applause. Okay.
Cook, take care of the baby.
And he
clean.
did change diapers, and he did
Changed
go
diapers
to
in the beginning, yeah.
take the kids to school as well.
Oh, yes.
What we call doing the school runs. So he ran
Oh yes.
with the kids to school,
Oh,
dropped
yeah.
them off.
When
Did
they
he do
got
homework
older.
with the kids?
Oh well, he did. He helped with the math. I never really was good at that. I did all the reading and the writing. He did the math.
So shared responsibilities.
Right.
That helps, and the kids saw that growing up, and did they appreciate that?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope they did. They better. I don't.
Okay. Well, you
I
would.
think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so.
Wonderful. So, what are the drawbacks? What would you rather change in him, or any problems? If you were to do it all over again, what would you change about your relationship? Anything?
Oh wow.
If it's perfect, it's okay to say it's perfect.
Well, I
if
don't
it's
know
not,
it's perfect, but I
Okay.
don't know what I would change if anything that big for me to think about to say I change.
okay. And what about her? What do you think, Steve? Would you change anything about Jeanette?
No, and I like that she's a stay-home mom and takes care of me and my kids.
Okay. And you are the
Yes,
ultimate
provider,
provider.
yeah.
By the way, I'd like to introduce you to this book. It's called How to Stay in a Happy Relationship or End an Abusive One. This book talks about the correct etiquette, the proper way to raise a family. It has a lot of comic relief into it. This is one of my favorite books. This book says you have to learn and live together with your partner. Once you appreciate your true self, it's easier to put your partner and your career and your family first, regardless of what the other person is thinking. It's a step-by-step, thorough guide to having a very happy relationship. Once you make sure that your career and education are intact and you have the perfect job, it's time to find the perfect woman. and to find the perfect woman, be willing to do what she wants for you to do together in order to grow spiritually. We're talking about spiritual growth here. Usually, for some reason, the girls always started first. But there are instances where I've seen guys start the spiritual growth and read the Bible and all that. So what you do is you surround yourself with other happy couples. Have you done that?
Yes.
Oh, yes,
That's what this book recommends.
yes.
It recommends that you find a new circle of good friends around you so that nobody gets sidetracked. In other words, since you two are not alcoholics, you're not going to surround yourselves with alcoholics,
No, no.
right?
Right.
Okay, so you find activities that are useful. What activities do you two like to do together?
Movies?
Reading, movies,
Movies.
and...
I think we like to go, most of our dates are dinner and a movie.
That's good.
You know, we used to like when we were younger. Obviously, when we were younger, we used to like to go up to. We used to live on South Phoenix. I don't know if
Good.
you know where that is. We used to go up
Yeah.
mountains and just hang out there and talk.
And I have a question. When you go out to dinner, who picks up the phone and looks on social media the whole time?
You want to answer that?
Who answers it? Steve or Jeanette?
Yes.
You are going to answer the
Yes.
question?
I do.
And do you think that's appropriate when you are out on a date with your own husband, you're looking at the phone like this? Oh, what's going on in Google today? Okay, what did they say on Facebook? Oh, wow, look at this couple.
No, I'm being honest. I don't think it's appropriate. I tried. I'm not out there constantly doing it.
Okay.
I'm not that person that I'm just looking there. Wow, no. I'll pick it up here and there.
Okay.
Maybe an example, like maybe once out of the whole time we're there.
Okay.
But I am, yeah. He doesn't. Yeah.
So,
She has
date
a phone that
etiquette.
flashes. So
I beg your
she has
pardon?
a phone that flashes.
Oh, really?
So it tells her, you know.
So, after this program, we're going to learn to shut our phones off
Yeah.
Yes.
completely, leave it in the car, leave it in her pocketbook, zip it up, and focus on each other. Eye to eye. You make proper eye contact and have a proper conversation and grow as a couple. There's still time to grow, and nobody is perfect. So, do we have any questions from the audience? I'm happy to, anybody who wants to ask a question, because this couple seems, you're just almost as good as the first couple, Jay and Sharon.
Hi, brother and sister. I'm going to ask both of you I'm going to ask you guys this question. As believers, would it be different in how you guys are going to be living with each other in the next 25 more years? How would you change anything as being yoked together? After the fact that you weren't, and then you were, and then now?
What would you like to change going forward for the next 25 years?
I think for me, what I would do is pray more together. I don't pray as much as I think we should.
Okay.
I think that's.
How about the
what we should do
Wednesday
more
Bible
together.
study? Do you two ever think of attending that?
I come.
Right here at Kingdom
I
Increase.
come.
Okay. And you can always bring him along.
Yeah,
Yes,
I need to
Steve,
come
yeah.
more. And we want to have our own little Bible study too. That's going to go forward
He
for
wants
us.
to do that at home with kids. Kids.
And
Okay.
it's all together for that.
Great. And then besides social media, do you have any other issues that crop up from time to time that we can work on with you?
No, I think I'm pretty good as far as with him.
No bad habits, nothing.
No, he's good.
No hanging out with
He had a mother that was
other guys.
very clean person, so he's clean.
Okay.
Thank good for me, huh?
Good. Okay. So this book is recommending that you make the best out of a perfect relationship, which your relationship is perfect, I could say, considering that you've been together you've been married 23 years, been dating for 25.
Yes.
So this guidebook is saying that you two continue in that particular way because that's the best way. And going forward in the future, avoid social media, avoid using cell phones when you go to a restaurant, and continue to walk together in the word of the Lord. Read together, do more things together,
Yes.
such as getting the kids to come to the next concert, gospel concert that we have,
Yes,
or
oh,
whatever else
definitely.
we're doing here, Wednesday night, Friday night, or whatever we are doing right here at Kingdom Increase.
Yes.
And if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to round up. Anybody? Any more questions? Okay, so the other question is, have you ever been on Facebook?
Yes.
Okay, how much time do you spend on Facebook?
No, I don't spend much. I say on a daily basis, maybe 10 minutes.
Facebook seems to be the ultimate
Once.
entertainment that
Once every time,
that
yeah.
keeps couples, sometimes arguing. But what about you? Tell us.
Maybe when I get home to relax. Because all we have is family and church.
Okay.
We don't have hardly any friends. I only have one close friend.
Yes.
And I grew up with her. So she is part of my family.
So having one close friend
And the
helps
rest
you
are
to
family
cut away the
and church
distraction from
Yes.
social media.
Yes, it
And
does.
getting into social media, did you say once a week
Once a week.
or once a day?
Yeah, once a day when I get home from work.
Okay. And what do you suggest for her to do when you're away, when you're at work?
When I work, she's
Busy.
busy cleaning the house. I can't even call her at lunch. And
Do you
busy
sometimes
right now.
join her in cleaning? So, because I'm looking for shared responsibilities between a couple that makes both of you happy. Do you sometimes help?
Yeah, I'll help her. Like maybe separate the clothes for her. Here, I separated what we got in our closet.
And you two do things together.
And do it together.
And you are always at home, or do you sometimes run away and go somewhere and have fun and
No, I'm
come back
mostly at
before he gets
home.
back from work?
I'm mostly at home. My fun is at church.
Oh, okay.
We fellowship here together, or I go with a lot of the sisters here, and we do things on our, out of church. We'll go to breakfast, to dinner, lunch, whatever.
So this is a very important question. Before you two decided to marry, did you sit together to talk about where he works, where you're gonna work, what your finances are likely to be, who is supposed to do what? Did you sit down to have a precise conversation about who's going to do what? Whether you should be the one at home taking care of the kids and whether he should be the one working. Who made this decision?
Nobody really.
It
It just kind of happened.
Because you've been praying together, or
Well, yeah.
Or
of
you just
course,
agree?
Once we started a family, I was working
yes?
when we got married.
Uh-huh.
But then once we started a family, I just decided, income was allowed me to be able to stay home. When you have your first baby, you kind of want to be there with them. So it happened that way. And then, but I always, just because I didn't go to work, I still worked. I took care of everybody's kids.
So everyone can agree that even when a woman is home and does not work outside the home, she's constantly working. In fact, that's where the real work is. Cooking,
Babysitting.
cleaning, vacuuming, doing the laundry,
Babysitting.
And
babysitting other people's children as well.
Maybe $600 a week I would take, or a month. Well, I would babysit other people's kids and like a little daycare at home. I did.
Good. I think that because of the way you've answered very correctly, you might be going home with a copy of this book today. How would you like to read about this?
that'd be
Read
awesome.
all the
Awesome.
good things in this book. It gives you a guide to a fruitful life full of meaning and spirituality, and tells you how to avoid the pitfalls in life, how to stay together for life, and also how to raise kids, and gives you advice on what to do when you come across difficult friends. And discipline, it says here on this page, it says discipline is a faithful friend who will introduce you to your true self. Discipline is the worthy protector who will defend you from your lesser self. And discipline is the extraordinary mentor who will challenge you to become the best version of yourself and all that God has created you to be. And it's as loyal and as life-giving as discipline may be, its presence in our lives is dwindling. But we need to hold on to that. Once you have self-discipline, everything else comes next. And this book also talks about discipline and societal values. Discipline is one good thing. Discipline helps you not to lose your mind, drink too much alcohol, and run around the neighborhood looking for pretty girls, or you're looking for the GQ guys, that kind of thing.
I got my GQ guy.
Right,
And
thank
as
you.
we can see in these days of cyclical divorces, a lot of couples reject discipline. But discipline is very important. Helps him not to look at pornography and all that, because he believes that you are the right person for him. And he stays true to you. And that's because he's got discipline. Without discipline, where would we be today? So God really put it into our lives to have good and bad, but we must choose the good. Yes? He gave us the free will to discern between good and bad. That's why we're right here at Kingdom Increase. And this is why this show is so important. Date Etiquette tells you how to have the proper etiquette when you're with your husband, such as covering your mouth when you yawn or cough, and him opening doors for you. And sometimes you can open doors for him as well, and joining him in activities that have things to do with mentoring the kids or teaching the kids. And that concludes today's edition of Date Etiquette. And I thank you guys.
Okay, thank you.
They've been a wonderful couple, haven't they?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome
Thank you.
couple.
Thank you.
Yes.